Bonjour à tous. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar organized by Alliance Française, Delhi, Gurgaon, and Noida. We are very happy to join in order to transmit, to give some tools, some knowledge about online teaching. Because as you all know, with the lockdown in India and all over the world, teaching has been very different. So we kind of upgrade, we got to new strategies, new methods. And in order for you to improve and to discover new tools, new stuff, we wanted to organize this webinar. Thanks to Institut Français in Paris, they could give us access to this wonderful platform. And yes, it has started, Kavita. So, for us, it was very important to focus on very practical tools, very practical stuff you can use in your classroom with your students to teach French language, but you can at the same time use it to teach every language, because the methodology could be used for other language as well. So at the beginning, I just wanted to introduce the people who will intervene in this webinar. So first of all, Vasanthi Gupta, academic consultant in Alliance Française Delhi, a very experienced teacher and now trainer for Alliance Française in India and Delhi especially. So she will start and she will kind of introduce the subject theoretically. And then we will welcome Prerna Dugal, which is a French teacher for many years in Alliance Française Delhi, and who will present the practical tools which she's using right now in her online classes, her French online classes in Alliance Française Delhi. And myself, Guillaume Grandjean, academic director in Alliance Française Delhi. So it is a pleasure for us to be here. And on the right side, you can see that you have the chat. The chat, as you know, it's to chat between each other. But you have questions as well. So during the presentation, if you have some question, you just click on the tab question, and then we will try to reply to the question you have asked during the webinar. If we have time at the end of the presentation. So now I will give the mic to Vasanthi Gupta, which will introduce all the theoretical aspects of the webinar.
Thank you, Guillaume. I'm really happy to see also so many people that I seem to have taught at some point and who have probably done our training also at the Alliance Française. Good evening to all. Thank you again for Guillaume, to Guillaume for the presentation. We are here today to basically address certain issues that online learning teaching have thrown as challenges to us. The subject is extremely vast. So therefore, I think it is important for us to contextualize and probably limit the scope of our discussion and presentation today. So therefore, a few questions on which I would like to start our deliberations on. The first being, are strategies and methodology different online? We may or may not agree with that, but it is an important question on which we should ponder upon. What impact does online learning have on strategies and methodology, if any? So when we are talking about strategies and methodology, does it mean student and the teacher, or does it mean strategies and methodologies for the student, but also for the teacher? Do we consider all these merely as challenges coming our way, or also look for ways to turn them into opportunities for the new normal that we are about to see very soon? What would be the takeaways for teachers like us and the educators in general? So this will be the premise of our general discussions today, and the presentation will revolve around these principal questions. So the field of education, I don't think I'm going to give you any earth-shattering, nouveauté. So the field of education has always been up to challenges over the decades, and has always known to come up with very creative and innovative responses, thanks to the technology and sciences also sort of being hand in gloves with education, and research being able to foresee much ahead of time these challenges, to which then they respond. That is probably why we see, even in a developing country like in India, technology-aided learning has been a reality now in many schools in India for almost over a decade, or a little more perhaps. However, I think it is important also to note here that it is limited to big metros and the few privileged. It was a funny moment for me to think it like this, because I felt instead of talking about BC and AD, we could be thinking about before COVID, so BC, and after COVID, so AC. The learner profile in India and in France, for instance, for online learning, I think there's a major difference. I'm sure most of you know about CNED, Centre National d'Éducation à Distance, under the Education Ministry, French Education Ministry, established almost in the 1940s, early 1940s, and it waited till almost, say, mid-90s, early 2000 for introducing online material for education. The interesting fact that I felt was they had already addressed the problem of education for children as early as in 1940s, for the simple reason that it was trying to address or take education to the door of all those displaced by war or any other situation, children who could not access education. Whereas in Indian context, the closest that I'm going to is open school system. Now, when you look at open school system, to me, what comes to mind is precisely adult education, maybe a little later to do with class 10 and 12 if you have missed your exam due to challenges in education that you've not received. Either it is because of some kind of a challenge that you have, or just dropouts, for instance. They could sit for class 10 and class 12 exams. This was the context in which distance learning began in Indian context. So the big stark difference being adult and a child. So I think when we compare before COVID and after COVID, that would be my major concern. Earlier, when we spoke about learner profile of online learning, it was an adult, independent, autonomous, knew more or less what his needs are, and had a sense of methodology towards it, a discipline, a motivation required for self-learning. Basically, distance learning meant also self-learning. So it was a studied choice that he made. Therefore, it was also need-based and extremely focused. So the teacher on the other side was aware of these needs and the learner context, therefore could adapt the content that he or she had to give to this learner. However, methodology, how adapted it was, is something that can be scrutinized and looked at. Now, if we shift to after COVID, the main stark difference happens to be that learning online has become an induced, occasioned, almost commissioned by either governments, agencies, institutions. Therefore, that difference does matter, which means we are not looking at motivated choices that we have made, but it has been more or less, it's come to us as a savior, as a rescuer, because if you didn't have online education, you didn't have education at all. So it was no choice. So the choice being one of the essential differences between before and after. In all this, both the learner and the teacher both caught by surprise and having to adapt to this brutal shift. The other important thing which I feel is important after discussing with various teachers from schools, the role of the parents. I think in the Indian context, it becomes an important factor because the parent is as much as concerned as anybody else in the curriculum, in the learning, in the entire process of learning. Whereas when you compare it with a learner of pre-COVID situation, the parent probably just had the role to pay for that course, and that's about it, and not much more. One more reality is the teacher in this context, post-COVID, overstressed, overstretched, and probably, I wouldn't call it undertrained, but unprepared or underprepared for this sudden change that they had to adapt to. So do we look at this entire scenario just as another aspect of COVID that we need to cope with, which means it is momentary, so we can just look at it as a challenge and just keep continuing, hoping that we come back to the same face-to-face situation and we take on from there where we left. Whereas I think the realities are going to be different. The other paradox, which is very interesting again to place on table, is that all of us, this is not limited only to India, but all over the world, whether it is educators, whether it is teachers, whether it is the institutions, whether it is the parents, whether it is the doctors, all have been majorly advocating and continue to advocate limited online time for children, obviously for their well-being. However, the paradox is that today education itself having gone 100% online, what are the chances that any of us can even have a say in the matter? We cannot. You just have to deal with the situation. That is why I spoke about coping with the situation. Also, in a way, one does have to cope. So the consequence being, the biggest consequence is the child is today with unlimited access to both technology and the technological advancements that he is with, like you see in the picture, the smartphone, the laptop, the internet, and the gadget. And the parent also has to accept this change, but are they accepting also the change in the learning patterns is a question that I would like to address. The other stark reality, as I was saying a little while ago, is for many others who cannot have access to technology or electricity or the gadgets, if they are not online, they are quite unfortunately off education itself. So these being our new realities, how does one deal with this fact? And do we just simply sit back and say these are challenges which will go or do we have means to sort of turn them around as an opportunity, at least for those privileged, and probably not immediately, but for the future? A few thoughts that I would like all of us to have is for educators, at least me as an educator engaged in the field of foreign language for almost 4 decades and having been training teachers for almost 30 odd years. Some observations that I feel are essential. Again, it is a fact that learning, teaching, both have been impacted. Therefore, both strategies and methodologies have to be different. I'm taking just a simple example from this picture that I have put. The principal actor of learning and teaching in Indian context has been the teacher, whether he or she likes it or not, given the fact that you have a teacher-learners ratio in the groups of almost 35-40:1, which means look at the way the children are seated. It is automatic that the teacher takes center stage and the students give that center stage willingly to the teacher, which means the independence is given. Now, is the teacher ready to share that space, even cede a part of that space to the learner, is a question. And are the children also ready to occupy that center stage? If not the center space, at least do a step to to this claim democratic space that they are entitled to with online learning. Are they ready to take this shift and make this shift? And are they ready and trained for this transition, whether it be teacher or the student? That's the question. One thing for sure is clear. Whether it is institutions, whether it is parents, whether it is teachers, whether it is, all have been forced out of their respective comfort zones. Redefining their roles becomes the most crucial part of our jobs now. In this kind of a scenario, also with the challenges that Indian situation, as I was mentioning, with the teacher-student ratio, the duration of a class period, for instance, or the curriculum to be finished, or then the evaluation to be conducted online, and the training aspect of the teachers. Given all these constraints, how do the available teaching tools online help this new teacher-learner partnership? Let's keep it in mind also that these tools have been developed often with an objective to replicate learning experience in face-to-face situation, which means that they are thinking in terms of communicative, activity-based, interactive kind of activities. What does the medium bring to the table, and how do we reimagine the learning process, and therefore, as a consequence, methodology, content, and evaluation? So all these need to be looked at. So I will invite Prerna to probably now give us some concrete examples of online teaching tools that she has been using at the Alliance. And then maybe I can probably illustrate with some examples that she would have illustrated, some takeaways for all of us. Prerna?
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful presentation. Bonjour and good evening to all. I am Prerna. As I was introduced in the beginning, I'm a teacher at Alliance Française de Delhi, and I would be showing you different online tools which I use in my classroom. In order to do so, I have divided my presentation into 2 parts. In the first part, I will just present you different online tools which we can use in our classrooms to attain different pedagogical objectives. The first tool which I would like to present to you is Padlet. Now, Padlet is a tool which basically allows all the students to create a post-it board. The students can share their ideas anonymously, or they can write their names if they are comfortable doing so. And it's basically like a living, breathing web page where all the information is available in real time. So teachers can make different kind of Padlets like wall, canvas, stream, shelf, map, etc. Like, for example, if you're doing an activity on subjunctive with your students, you can tell them that you can make a Padlet where you just put a post, a picture, and you tell your students to leave comments using subjunctive. And then you can do the correction together. Second app which I would like to share with you is Teaming. Teaming is an excellent app for collaborating on images. I'll show you how it works. As you can see here, the teachers just need to sign up and upload an image. For example, if you're working on the concept of a maison, a house. So you upload an image of a house where there are different rooms of the house. And then you tell your students, you share the link with the students, all of them log in, and then they can annotate on the image, they can write comments. So you can ask them write the names of different rooms in French, which is your favorite room, or maybe just annotate and circle anything. So this is basically an app which helps you to work on images, but in a collaborative way. And the third app which I would like to share with you, which I find very interesting, is Zoho. Zoho is again a collaborative document. But normally in a collaborative document, we can write text together. But Zoho is a document which is an app which allows us not just to write. We can insert pictures, we can insert videos, students can insert, they can draw on the app itself. For example, if you just click on create, then click on document, you can make a spreadsheet, you can make a presentation. For school students, for example, if the teacher has done with them the concept of colors, the teacher can ask them to draw shapes. They can work in different groups. You can make three Zoho pads, and you share the link with the students. They can make shapes and put colors into it. Or if you have done animals, they can draw animals and name the animals in French. For higher classes like IB boards, students can make PPT presentations together on Zoho app. They can make travel brochures, posters, cover page of the magazine, etc. So personally, I find this app very interesting and very useful in my classes. Moving on to the second part of my presentation, where I would like to show you exactly how do I plan my entire pedagogical unit with the help of online tools. Personally, what I find very exciting and fascinating in this medium is that I can put into place an action-oriented approach. Let's say in about 6 hours, I can train my students to achieve the final task. Imagine for my entire unité didactique, the final task is to describe a space. Now that can be any space, be it student's house, his school, or his father's office, or any other area which is relevant to his context. Now, since we are all facing this COVID-19 situation and we are stuck at home, so I thought of sharing the example of how to describe your house, where my final task is that the student should be able to describe the house in detail. And I achieve this task only with the help of online tools. Now, to achieve this task, students need to know different rooms of the house, different objects we can find in the house, location prepositions like under, on, above, at the side of, etc. Simple adjectives to describe the house like small, big, spacious, or which room they like the most and why, and which room they don't like at all and why. What is very interesting for me is that I can attain my pedagogical goals and I can test all the 4 skills of the students, be it reading, writing, comprehension, or speaking, with the help of online tools. So to achieve my final task, which is the student should be able to introduce his or her house, the first activity I do with my students, and the app and the site which I use in the classroom is TV5 mode. TV5 mode is an excellent site where we can find authentic videos, authentic documents with the fiche apprenant et fiche enseignant. That is, you can use the videos, you can use the ready-to-use fiche in the classrooms. You can make them watch the video and do the fiche with them. I would like you to have a glimpse of the video so that so as to understand how I go about in my classroom with this video.
Bonjour, bienvenue chez moi. Bonjour, je vais vous faire visiter. Ici, c'est l'entrée. Venez. Ici, c'est l'entrée. Là, c'est un placard où on range les vêtements. Là, c'est le salon. Le bureau, avec ici mon piano. À droite, c'est le couloir. Là, ce sont les toilettes. La salle de bain. La chambre de maman.
As you can see in this video, there are two adolescents who are describing different rooms of the house. So I watch this video with my students and then I do a comprehension globale and détaillée where we discuss the questions. In order to do that, I put them into different breakout rooms, like for example, if there are 12 students in my class, I divide them into a group of 3 each. For that, there are 4 breakout rooms. I share the link of the video with them and share the fiche also, so that in the groups, they discuss the activity, they watch the video again, and they finish the fiche. So once that is done, together we discuss the answers to verify whether they have given the right answers or not. After doing that, my second activity is actually an oral activity where I ask my students to share 2-3 pictures of different rooms of their house and to present these rooms to their classmates in the house. I do this activity because firstly, they know after having watched the video, the students know how do we call different rooms of the house in French. But this oral activity helps them to pronounce in French. Like, for example, bedroom is a chambre, and drawing room is salon. So they are able to pronounce this. And secondly, they know how to present this. Like, this is my bedroom, or here is my drawing room. So these expressions, which would help them eventually to achieve their final task. After having done this entire activity with the video, my second app, which I use in my class, which I personally love using, is Word Wall. I use this app for verification, for systematisation. I will show you how this app works. This is an app where we can create activities, and even we can find ready-to-use activities on this site. I share the link of this particular activity with the students, where I ask them to match different rooms of the house with the images. So this particular site and this activity helps me to verify whether the students have understood the concept, whether they have understood what is bedroom in French or what is drawing room in French. And with this, we can also work a little bit with masculin, féminin, le et la, article défini. The big advantage of this site is that we can see the results. We have the real-time data available with us. Like, for example, you can see here, I shared the link with the students, and then I can check how many students have finished the activity, how much time they took to finish, how many correct answers and how many incorrect answers they have given. So, thanks to this leaderboard, I can actually assess for how many students this concept is clear and for how many students this concept isn't very clear, so that I can help them to understand this concept in detail. Personally, I feel that this app is very useful in a situation where the number of students in a class is pretty high. The strength of the class is high, is more, because if 30-40 students in a class, it's very difficult to verify whether each and every one of them has understood the concept explained or not. Because asking 1 or 2 questions to each student to verify is a difficult thing to be done in a 40, 50, even a 1-hour class. So this app comes to our rescue. Here, you just share the link, all the students answer, and you can see in real time what are the correct answers, how many have understood and how many haven't. And another good thing about this site is that obviously you can create your own activities, but if you are running out of time and you don't have that much time to create an activity every single time, there are lots of activities available on this site which are ready to use. All you need to do is just share the link with the students and they do the activity and you get the leaderboard. So after having verified the entire concept, whether they have understood or not, I move on to my another activity, which is location prepositions. In order to do this, I use the app Cuisinier. Now, Cuisinier is an app which basically allows us to make quiz, to make questions like multiple choice questions, fill in the blanks, etc. So here I found a document in a manual which I have scanned and uploaded on the site. In this document, as you can see, it's a picture of an office which is completely disorganized. So all the objects are basically not at their place. And there's a small text explaining what has happened in the office. Now, my first question, which I asked to my students is just read the text, look at the picture, and just locate the different location prepositions used in the text, like on, under, at the side of, against, in front of, etc. Once they have located the different prepositions, we move on to different questions where they have to answer, okay, where is the chair? It's against the wall. Where are the posters? It's on the window. So that they are able to use these prepositions in sentences. After having done the Cuisinier and the location prepositions, my next tool which I use in my class to attain this final task is Corona Maison. Now, Corona Maison is basically a site which was created during the lockdown period. There is indeed French cartoonist Pénélope Bagieux. He actually came up with this idea, with this initiative. He started on Twitter, I think, for the social media platform with the name, let's design our ideal place to be confined. So he just put a picture of a blank room with a staircase, and he asked anyone and everyone to fill up this picture with all the activities or with what your house basically looks like during the lockdown period. So there were a lot of illustrators and amateurs who actually participated, and they put up drawings of their drawing room, bedroom, and different parts of the house, basically. So to do my activity, I used 2-3 pictures from this site. And as you can see here, since the platform Zoom gives us the option of annotating. So all the students can annotate, they can write on the picture, they can draw, they can mark, etc. In case you're not using your Zoom platform or your platform doesn't allow this annotating, you can always use the app Teaming, which I showed in the beginning, which does the same job of collaborating on images. So here, firstly, in the chat room, I give a set of words to my students, like, for example, a door, a big sofa, a small table, books, and I ask them to match the words with the different objects in the house. This is the first activity. Now, once they have matched all the words with the house, where there are adjectives also like a spacious studio, a big sofa, a small kitchen, etc. Then I move on to my second activity where I put them into different breakout rooms and I ask them to make questions. They have to make questions, but the answers have to be no. For example, are the books on the sofa? No, the books are on the table. So this activity basically helps them to work with the objects of the house, of different objects we can find in a house, and also to revise the location prepositions which we did in the previous activity. After having done this, I move on to my next app, which is Mentimeter. Now, Mentimeter again is an app which can be used for brainstorming before starting a chapter or for getting a feedback. But to achieve this final task, to use this app, firstly, all you need to do is just click on Add Slide. Then you have different templates available. You can choose multiple choice, word cloud, etc. For example, I choose word cloud. Then you just have to type in your question and choose the entries per participant. And then you just share the link with the students. They can all log in and answer anonymously. You won't know who has answered what. So here I did an activity with my students where I asked them that which activities you do in your drawing room. So they answered, like someone said, I watch TV, I read, I play video games, I eat with my family, etc., etc. So this helped me to work with different activities which can be done in different rooms of the house, or maybe transpose it later, activities they can do in school or with their friends in a park. So, and moreover, I could also work with the verbs since they were talking about eating, reading, watching, etc. After using the app Mentimeter, my next online tool to achieve the final task would be YouTube. I'm sure all of you must know that YouTube is full of videos which we can use in our classrooms. So one such video which I found on YouTube, which was very helpful for me, is Les pièces de la maison. So in this video, basically there are 4 adolescents who are talking about their house. One of them lives in a villa, another one lives in a small house, third one lives in an apartment, and another one lives in a small studio. So they talk about different rooms of the house and they tell which is their favorite room and why, and which room they don't like at all and why. So after having watched this video, I do the compréhension globale and compréhension détaillée with my students so that they understand the video. And then we do an oral activity where I ask them to discuss about their favorite room in the house and which room they don't like at all. For example, I like my bedroom because I can study, I can read without noise in my bedroom. So all of us together, we do this oral activity. And then finally, I ask them to do the final task, which is describe your house. Now, they have to film their house and post the video on Apollearn, which is a platform which Alliance Française uses for posting videos, documents, and audios. But if you don't have any such platform, you can obviously ask your students to put it on Google Drive. Now here, personally, I find this entire pedagogical unit or objective very close to real life situation because a student can have a friend in France or any other Francophone country and maybe just do a video conferencing with him or her to describe different rooms of the house, talk about different objects he has in his house, use location prepositions, use adjectives, etc. So since the activity is very close to real life situation, students are more, I think, interested. They find it very enjoyable and diverting at the same time. And I could do all these activities and attain my final task only with the help of online tools, which is something I find very captivating in this medium. And just finally, I would like to even share another app with you, which I use in my classroom since we have done lots of oral activities in this entire Unité Didactique. In order to do a written activity with them, I use this app, which is called, use this site, which is called Framapad. Now, Framapad, again, is a collaborative document. As you can see on this app, this here, you just need to share the link with the students. So once they log in, they are attributed different colors. So whenever they type, even you or other students get to know who has written what. So for this activity, I make 3 groups, put them into breakout rooms, and I make 3 Framapads. And I share the link of these Framapads with them. And then I ask them to describe their dream house. It can be a villa, it can be a palace, or it can even be a small apartment in Switzerland. So they talk about their dream house and they write a small paragraph collaboratively together on from a pad. And students, through my practical experience, I can say that students love working together, interacting, and doing a document together. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying that this medium of online teaching is vast. There is so much content available online that we can use in our classrooms, that we can actually, which will help us make our online teaching or our entire pedagogical objectives, unité didactique, more interesting and more enjoyable for teachers as well as for the students. Thanks a lot. And I think now Madame Basanti would like to continue, maybe conclude this entire thing.
Just before Basanti follow up, I just wanted to reply to some questions related to the Prerna presentation, the wonderful presentation she just had done. So Padlet, is it gratuit? Is it free?
Yes, actually, Padlet, you can make 3 Padlets, which are free for the moment. And for the time being, due to the coronavirus, they have allowed us to make 8 Padlets free. But normally, 3 are free. After that, you have to pay to make more Padlets.
All right. Is it the same for the other tools? Are other tools free as well?
Some of them are free, like for example, Mentimeter, there is a limit. You can limit to the number of slides. But like for example, one presentation, you can make 2 slides, not more than that. If you want to make more, then you have to pay. WordWall is free. Corona Maison is free. Cuisinier is free. You can make as many exercises as you want. And TV Saint Monde, obviously, we can use. It's absolutely free. Framapad and Zoho and Teaming are also free. We don't have to pay for that.
Okay, very good. So one question about the breakout rooms. So the breakout rooms, it's technical. So you just need to activate the breakout rooms in your video conference application in Zoom. And so we use Zoom in Alliance Française, but apparently in the chat I saw that in Google Meet we can have breakout rooms as well. So for this, just like on Zoom, for sure it's accessible and it's free for now because India is still in lockdown. So if you don't know how to do it, you can look for tutorial on YouTube. You have many of them which can explain how to do it. And the last question about the pedagogical courses online. We'll make a presentation at the end to explain what Alliance Française Delhi do regarding this topic. Thank you, Prerna.
You're most welcome. Thanks a lot.
I just probably link the 2. In fact, I think she's presented the practical side of it, and certainly we will have many questions to be asked on this as well. However, I think there are some very major takeaways from this, both at the level of strategy and methodology. So I just made 2 little slides, which we can just run through quickly, because I think the important question needs to be addressed by Guillaume, which all of us are interested in knowing, which is evaluation, which is a huge challenge online. Especially as somebody did mention, with such large numbers, how do we make it interactive and not knowledge-based, but it has to be activity-based. These are the challenges that we will have. So here is one, the tools available that she has presented, Prerna. One is availability of many ready-to-use fun templates. So there are templates ready for you to use, and some of these templates are used by, for management trainings, etc., which we are using for language. So why not? So this interdisciplinary, help is also very welcome. Most of these apps also are time savers, because I think the technology, what it has done is also made knowledge sharing as being part of all our daily habits, whether it is for students or for teachers. So if you create an exercise, for instance, on a template, you can also share it on the same site so that others can use can benefit of your creativity as well. So that is a time saver for all, and also the sharing of information. Most of these apps are replicating the real life, I'm saying face-to-face context. Therefore, very engaging and promote both horizontal and vertical interaction in a group. Ensures everybody is heard, which means your student learner ratio is not really as big a challenge as it is in a face-to-face context. Some people have asked about the breakout rooms. It is true that it is limited to Zoom, but I'm sure there are other ways to come about, get over this challenge. For instance, some of the apps that Prerna sort of illustrated with, WordWall, I think it was, where many participants, supposing you have 33, all 33 at a time are participating, and you can ensure the participation of all, which is a very interesting, thing. Evaluation in the sense, the assessment, the regular assessment that is happening, helps you to monitor, like she did mention in her presentation, a constant monitoring of their progress and follow-up, which becomes a transparent process for both the learner and the teacher. The biggest takeaway for me also is a dynamic, the correction, that looks, as a huge challenge for most of us in a face-to-face context, and especially with 30, 40 students to, handle. Here, the correction becomes a very collaborative way of functioning. So from a pad that she presented does, make correction as an activity from where a learner is going to learn, and mistakes, it doesn't come across as a mistake and an error only, but becomes a learning process for everybody. And also the entraide, which happens in a classroom, in that you can replicate with these kind of apps. There's some takeaways for the methodology of learning. So since most of these apps are activity-based learning, encourage initiatives from the learner, so he has to own up the responsibility of learning. So maybe the online, this transition period can be used to develop certain skills of an independent learner, of an online learner, which I explained in the in my presentation in the beginning. He can be independent, have an own voice, and yet be able to collaborate with his peers and adults, because the teacher is going to be involved in this whole process. Developing skills to be a responsible learner, and maybe one day we can dream that he can be he can take the responsibility of using intelligently the internet access that he's got, overnight, 100%, all the time, etc. So il peut gérer cette réalité, nouvelle réalité. He is also sort of made capable of critical thinking. He's monitoring his own progress and coming up with, looking at his own progress with these apps that are coming up. Now, the only interesting fact for me in this was the exercises that she presented gave you a complete picture for a unit for children. It does take into consideration that it's a child who needs to develop some of these methodologies for learning for life skill. Maybe it becomes a skill for life one day. So that with that, I think I'm really sorry we've taken a lot of time, and Guillaume has very short time to give you the evaluation, the creative way of evaluating all this that we have. Sorry,
Thank you, Vasanthi. No worries. I will have enough time to present what I want to say, what I want to transmit, what I want to add on this webinar. So evaluation, it's a very important part, because the first thing the teachers in Alliance Française, and I think many teachers all over the world, ask when the lockdown happened is, how can we evaluate the learners? How is it possible? We cannot monitor them, we cannot control. So how to do that? It will be a mess. It will be impossible. And so the question are two. It's what do we evaluate, and how do we evaluate? And we'll try to reply to these two questions tonight in this webinar. So first of all, when we think about evaluation online, the first word, the first thought we have in mind is, they will cheat. They will out-cheat, because learners, we cannot trust them. Learners, we need to be careful of learners. So we, as a teacher, would think, no, they will cheat, and this is very bad. So this is the first thing, the first thought we will have in mind when we think about evaluation online. But cheating, we need to see what does that mean, cheating, and we need to find a solution for the cheating to be impossible. Because if the cheating is impossible, in that case, online evaluation is possible. So we need to think about that. And in that case, we need to see, what do we evaluate? So if we evaluate knowledge, so knowledge, it's, for example, how to conjugate a verb. For example, it could be vocabularies, vocabulary. So knowledge, it's something which the learner knows. He knows the content of the vocabulary, for example. So it's short, live, in your mind. You need to memorize it, and then you just need to write it, to say it, and during the evaluation. So basically, it's just repetition. And in that case, it is pretty. It is pretty easy to cheat, because when it's knowledge to evaluate, you can copy to your neighbor, you can copy on your textbook or on internet or everywhere. So what you need to evaluate online, even more than in the normal evaluation, is skills. Because when we evaluate skills, it's much more harder to cheat. Why it's harder to cheat? Because a skill, it's a way for the learner to use the language. So the skills are more complex and they're more authentic. So when it's authentic, it's harder to cheat, because the verb être, to be in French, will be the same for every learner. But when you ask a learner to present an experience he had, in that case, it's harder to cheat, because it needs to give something personal. So for you to have in mind what we can do, I will give you an example, a small example for complete beginners, beginner level. So Prerna has focused her presentation on the house. So I will do the same for this evaluation proposal. So the objective is to talk about the house. All right. So we need to see which skills we'll evaluate. All right. So it's to be able to talk about your own house. So it needs to know the vocabulary of the house. It needs to know some preposition, as Prerna said in her presentation. some verbs to describe apartment, house, room, everything. And it will be an oral presentation, so it needs to be, it needs to have this ability to express himself in oral, but it could be at the same time on a written expression. And the task will be the key points for the evaluation to be correct in an online situation. So the task is to make a video recording of the house. So basically, almost normally every student or their parents, they have a smartphone, with it could be a pro camera, it doesn't matter. Like just it needs to have a small camera, and they can use the camera to record the place and to explain the place where they are living, describing in French language. And then, to have both oral and written expression, it's possible to combine this task by asking a map, and the map could be done by pen, and then to take a picture of this production to verify the authenticity of the production. So this guide me to reply to one of the questions, saying that how to evaluate la production écrite, so written production, how to do this. Many of us are afraid of a copy paste. We are afraid of Google Translation. So these two examples, one of it, for example, the copy paste. The copy paste, if you know your learners, if you know the level of your learners, you can see very easily if it's a copy paste or not, especially for the A1 levels. For the higher levels, you have some software who can help you to see if there is plagiat, if they copy or not, or you can just
Guillaume, you're on mute.
Yes, we can't hear you.